Everybody. Oh, that was a bit dry. You all been travelling too long to get here. First of all, it's a great honour to be here. My name is Andy Kerr. I'm a board member at the Scottish Funding Council, and when the invite was circulated around board members, I was very quick to respond because I'm really very interested in what you guys do. And as you know, the Scottish Funding Council is responsible for sustaining the provision of higher and further education. In Scotland, we use public money to fund colleges, universities, other tertiary education centres, investments supporting a broad range of activities, teaching and learning, of course, skills and apprenticeships, research, innovation, and knowledge exchange. I'll be particularly interested in what you say in the Menti in terms of what the pressures are, because I'm clearly that's something we want to hear about back at the Scottish Funding Council. Could I first of all thank Glasgow University for the opportunity to be in this quite amazing building, a community of researchers, as it was described in one of the videos outside, and it really is a very impressive place to be. I was last here in 2005 as Minister for Health in Scotland, visiting longitudinal research clinical trials, and thankfully Glasgow and Scotland have retained its position in terms of leading research in many fields. So it's great to be here and great to be part of this day today. Can I also thank you for the work that you do, and I don't think that is said glibly or said often enough, because I know it's people like you who make change happen in many different ways throughout Scotland and of course the world. And it's great to see the international partnerships that are being developed by you and by others. And also, as a former member of the Scottish Government, it is still very rewarding to see continuing efforts by successive governments for Scotland within the devolved settlement that we have here in Scotland, and within that devolution settlement, still being outward looking, still being influential, and still playing a part in the international arena and international stage. When I was in government, we started our work in Malawi under the First Minister that I served with, Jack McConnell. I took great interest in that work, and it was great to see the names of Blantyre and Lilongwe out there in one of the posters. Brought back very fond memories for me. But when I moved on from politics, or it moved on from me, if people know the outcome of the 2011 election, I joined an organisation called Send Scotland. And again, we were able to apply for Scottish Government funding and support to take the learning that we have in Scotland around communication challenges for those with learning disabilities and needs. And we could take and exchange that work in Malawi. And it was just a great project about learning from each other. And I can see flavours of that coming out here today. So that was something for me that has stayed with me. And I'm still very proud of Scotland within its role internationally. It's great to see so many research professionals here with us today, and researchers, and be joined by colleagues from the UK funding agencies, as well as Scottish and UK government colleagues. As a member of the board, I can safely tell you that we discuss research and knowledge exchange very frequently. It's a focus of every board meeting and many of our committees also. And of course, it's our ambition as an organisation to see that Scotland is in its best place to learn, educate and research and innovate. We want to make sure that happens. It's challenging, as we all know at the moment, but again, that ambition remains. It is heartening to know and remember that our universities are amongst the best in the world. Leading edge research creates knowledge of immense social, economic, cultural value, essential not only to Scotland to tackle its challenges, but also opportunities now in the future, and vital for our collective health and well-being throughout the world. And our reputation, our very strong reputation for science and research and excellence, attracts talent and investment from around the world. And that means you in here as well. So it's great to see you. It's great to know that we are playing part of problem solving throughout the world, tackling global problems. These are ambitions that you have and we have as a nation. And I've seen many of the posters outside, the diagnosis of illness and disease, upholding human rights, and of course preserving cultures. And again, much evidence of that on display, not just in the posters, but throughout today's session. We are a leading research nation with an active and productive research community that publishes highly regarded research. And of course, many of you may know the Elsevier found that Scottish research received 80% more citations in academic papers than the global average. And they also found that Scotland is a key international collaborator. Over 1/3 of all Scottish research related to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and over half the research is carried out with international partners. So that's all good to know. What a very strong base we have, and I wish you every success today. I look forward to hearing the exciting work that's been undertaken, and we're going to now start with some scene setting. Thanks very much.
Hi, hello there. My name is Jamie Cross. I'm here as Director of Glasgow Changing Futures, which is a major new investment by the University of Glasgow in challenge-led research, teaching and public engagement. You'll hear a little bit more about that later. But I'm also here on behalf of the University of Glasgow, myself and the Vice Principal for Research, Chris Pearce, who can't join us today, to welcome you, and also just to say how happy we are to be able to host representatives, stakeholders and higher education institutions from across the country. I think we have pretty much every university bar one represented here today. And I know post-COVID how important that is for us all to be able to come together. So my job throughout the day is pretty much as the MC to try and help keep things on time and keep things moving along. And I'm going to chair this first session, which is going to help us set the scene for the day. So I'd like to invite our panelists to come up to the chairs in front of us here. And so we have Julie Fitzpatrick, the Chief Scientific Advisor of Scotland, who is also a former Glasgow graduate. We have Diana Dalton. Diana, if you'd like to come up as well. Who is the Head of Gender and Equalities at FCDO. We have David Price and Eva Maria Schnelton from the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And we have Claire McPherson from University of Scotland. And finally, Jonathan Underwood, the Major International Programme Lead for Welcome. Thanks very much. So as you can see, we've just moved things around so people don't get blinded by the projector in the background. Julie, I'd like to invite you to come up first. And sorry, panelists, we have this little clicker here, which you can use to move.
Thank you very much indeed, Jamie. It's fantastic to be invited to speak here today on the important topic of international development and Scotland's contribution to solving the challenges facing the world. And it's great to see so many people here. I understand it was really sold out, so it was hard to get a seat for today, which I think is great. And it shows the outward-looking nature of the research sector in Scotland, and of the importance really of advancing knowledge and technology, promoting social justice, fostering sustainable development, and how that plays in shaping Scotland's global identity. As the Chief Scientific Advisor for Scotland, I'm really lucky to have the opportunity to see for myself the range and quality of Scottish research, and I visit lots of different places around Scotland. It's fantastic. And that allows me to bang the drum for our fantastic science and research sector here in Scotland and further afield. So I'm sure that everyone here knows that our research base is recognised internationally for expertise, innovation, and the collaborative ethos that we have in Scotland, delivering multiple impacts. We actually deliver influence across 170 countries and territories in the world. And that's a report conducted recently by RAND Europe last year. And that's underpinned by our strength of expertise in tackling the global challenges, some of which include food poverty, healthcare disparities, and environmental sustainability. And that's supported by our highly international research base. Almost half of our researchers are international. 23% of research staff at Scottish universities from EU backgrounds, nationalities, while over a quarter, 26%, from outside the EU. And that's in 2022-23. I think that's a fantastic mix. So the global challenges are very close to my heart as a graduate from the Vet School in Glasgow. And throughout my professional career, I've been really interested in sustainable food production and the difference that can make for animals and for people. There's a clear link between food systems and our man-made or anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a prize for all of us in supporting food production that achieves a finer balance in being good for the environment, for animals and people. And my own research while at Glasgow University earlier in my career focused on preventing infectious diseases of livestock, particularly cattle, sheep and goats in pastoralist, agro-pastoralist and smallholder systems in Tanzania. Some of the diseases we worked on transmit from animals to humans, and that includes TB and brucellosis. Working in East Africa changed my entire perspective on my life and on the importance of food and the role of research and development in this area. I was really fortunate to be funded by DFID, now incorporated into FCDO, and the projects that I was helping to supervise allowed me to co-supervise 7 PhD students over 10 years or so. These graduates were mainly vets or medics, and they all stayed in Tanzania after their studies, and they now hold a variety of senior roles in universities, governments, and businesses. And it's great to see the legacy that international education can bring, and I'm very proud of that particular role. There's a real sense of global purpose driving Scotland's research base. Each of Scotland's 19 universities undertakes sustainable development research, and almost a third of Scotland's research is directly related to our national performance framework and the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals that Andy Kerr has just mentioned. There's plenty of activity I could highlight, but because we're at the University of Glasgow today, I wanted to highlight the work that's been done with Kalamazoo University of Health Sciences with support from the Scottish Government. It's a fantastic story of the Blantyre research facility, and it exemplifies the transformative power of international research partnerships. The collaboration isn't just developing cutting-edge clinical laboratories in Blantyre, Malawi, and at UNZA in the University of Zambia. It's about strengthening expertise and aiming to create a sustainable pipeline of research and innovation capacity in Africa, for Africa, by Africans. The Scottish Government has a number of long-term funding streams and initiatives that seek to continue to build capacity and networks in areas of international importance. And these include funding for core grants via the Scottish Funding Council that allows universities flexibility to work and partner on an international stage. Initiatives and organisations such as the Alliances for Research Challenges and the Innovation Centres, and the Scottish Government's International Development Fund. The Scottish research and innovation sector forms part of a broader, interconnected UK and international ecosystem, and it's vital that Scotland is able to benefit from future opportunities, such as through the UK Government's International Science Partnership Fund and the wider programmes, of course, such as Horizon Europe. As the Chief Scientist, I'm happy to continue to act as a link between the research base and the Scottish Government and the UK Government through the UK Chief Scientist Network to ensure that we position Scotland as strong as we possibly can in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pass straight over to Diana.
Right, good morning, everybody. Sorry about the computer. I was hoping to print off my notes this morning, and then, of course, the printer didn't work at home. It's classic. Anyway, so I'm going to read from my my screen. Yes, as the introduction said, I head up the FCDO's work on gender inequality. I've actually had a really varied career. I started my career in the NGO sector, always in international development. I moved into government in 2005. And inside government, I've had a varied set of roles overseas and in Scotland. I've never been based down in London, but we spend quite a lot of time up and down on the train. But my last job actually in FCDO was as well in DFID pre-merger was as the head of the research department. So that's one of the reasons I was really keen when I heard about this event to be able to come and join. In my time there, the DFID invested around £290 million a year in international development research. It's multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, from climate and conflict through to health, gender, economic growth, you name it. I would imagine you can find a match somewhere within the portfolio with your interests. So as part of that huge budget, we developed incredibly strong partnerships with research institutions all around the world, but also including here in Scotland. I just want to say I am joined by quite a few colleagues from FCDO who work in different parts of the organisation. So would you mind putting your hands up? A bit shy. Great, okay. So please do talk to them in the break, so they don't feel lonely. And also don't blame them for any government policies that you're not too keen on. So today I'm just going to talk about the white paper, particularly because it is the biggest product that we've got that sets the scene for what our priorities are. It sits alongside important government documents like the Integrated Review, which was refreshed last year, and that represents a comprehensive strategic framework that tries to define the UK's role in the world, and it feeds into how we approach security, defence, development and foreign policy. So the white paper that was launched just before Christmas sits as like a sister product to the Integrated Review. And I don't know if you've read it, but it's pretty comprehensive. It's got a lot in there. And it's seen by us as the roadmap for accelerating progress on eliminating poverty and tackling climate change and biodiversity loss up to 2030. It's a key part of our foreign policy. The merger of FCDO and DFID has really blended our diplomatic and development efforts in a way that sort of happened before, but was a bit siloed. So there are, whilst those of us who came from DFID were slightly horrified when they announced the merger, actually there are real benefits that are being seen in terms of what you can achieve as a wholly joined up government, particularly at a country level. Andrew Mitchell, the Deputy Foreign Secretary, he's just recently acquired a new title. He's worked really hard to secure cross-party support for the white paper. So we're really hoping that what's in it will endure if we have a change of government later in the year or early next year. It seeks to be forthright in showing how the UK government remains fully committed to development after it took a bit of a hit, I think, after the merger in terms of it dropping in profile, but there's been a huge amount of internal and political effort to get it back up the agenda again. So what does it say? Well, it says in a contested and more divided world where the impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss are accelerating, we need to rethink our approach. We're not dealing with the same geopolitical climate that we were 10 years ago. Andrew Mitchell was our international development minister 10 years ago. Such a lot has changed since he was minister, and it's actually more complicated, more difficult to make progress, more crises, more conflicts. It also reaffirms the UK's commitment to return to 0.7% of GNI on ODA, but when the fiscal situation permits. So there is no deadline on that, but I know that both sides of the political fence are keen to get back to that ultimately. And it also sets greater ambition for spending over 50% of bilateral ODA in less developed countries, which are also incredibly fragile. It sets out a whole of government approach. It focuses very heavily on partnerships, prioritising mutual respect with an emphasis on country ownership, accountability, transparency and common values. There's a commitment in the white paper to develop a localisation strategy, which is particularly important for my area of responsibility on equality and rights, where the priority of locally led organisations shouldn't be underestimated. We're trying to channel more funding into locally led grassroots actors, building their capacity, providing platforms to ensure that voices are heard and there's full participation. And then the white paper also reiterated the government's commitment to spend 11.6 billion on international climate finance between 21-22 and 25-26, some of which you all have heard announced at COP last year. It also commits us to scope a new fund of up to 15% of FCDO's bilateral humanitarian spend on resilience and adaptation. So really trying to close that gap between the climate challenges and those who find themselves in crises. So our areas of global partnership are really to go further and faster to mobilise more finance, international finance, strengthening and reforming the international system across trade, tax, debt, dirty money, health, climate and conflict. a huge commitment to harness innovation, technologies, science and research, and also ensuring opportunities for all. So making sure that women and girls do take centre stage, that education and health systems are strengthened. In terms of building resilience and enabling adaptation, I'm really pleased that social protection, which is also an area that I'm responsible for, cash or cash plus, is recognised as a critical mechanism to build resilience, protect families and communities from shocks. So just to summarise, I'm getting a few flags going here. Research, everything that we do has to be founded in a strong evidence base, and it is, we prioritise it, but it has to evolve just as the geopolitical context evolves, just as programme approaches evolve, the evidence base needs to evolve. So it has to be dynamic, has to be constantly moving. If you read the white paper, you'll see the areas of research that are likely to be prioritised going forward. So with that comes invitations to bid, to run programmes, collaborate with others, create consortia. So I do suggest, if you haven't read that, you do have a look at it to see the direction of travel. And we have some really excellent models of evidence programming going on alongside testing innovation. So you're actually, in real time, you're evaluating whether or not something's working and has the potential to go to scale. So I'm really happy to talk to people about those programs. We've got one on violence against women, one on disability inclusion, that are live and maturing. So I think I'll probably stop there because I could say lots more, but really happy to talk to people in the break. And if you've got any questions for any of the other folk here from FCDO, please do approach them. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Diana. Sorry to be strict on time. I'm sure everyone has lots of questions for you after this as well. So without further ado, David Price from the Royal Society of Edinburgh.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak here. So my name is David Price. I'm a professor of neuroscience at the University of Edinburgh, but I'm here today representing the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And is this thing working? Right. Yeah, shall I just say, yeah. Okay, so there's the building of the Royal Society of Edinburgh. So the Royal Society of Edinburgh has very active international activities, and these really build on its strength, the strength of its fellowship. There's about 1,800 fellows of the Royal Society, and it has convening power to bring people together for the greater good. Okay, so next slide, please. I'm going to focus today on one of these activities that I've been involved with, particularly, which is because I am the chair of the group, the Africa Working Group activities. This comprises RSE fellows, corresponding fellows in Africa, and other experts. In last year, we actually undertook a scoping exercise to find out what is going on across Scotland in collaboration, partnership with African countries. Some of you may have been interviewed by Joan Haig, who went around and did that work over the summer, and we've produced a report which you can get by using that QR code there. Also, I should say there is a table outside which has got that QR code on it, and which please come by and talk to us. Okay, so next slide. Our plans are to continue that scoping exercise this year. It was very successful, but it has holes in it. And that's because it was undertaken over a couple of months. So there are things missing from it. We know that, and we would like to fill them in, and we'd like to update it. So we're going to be recruiting soon to get somebody this summer to continue that work. So hopefully we'll be in touch with many of you in the coming months. I know that a lot of people have found it very useful. The second activity that we are promoting is a second workshop. We held a workshop last autumn, which was built on that report. We're doing a second one, and this one is particularly for early career researchers, and they are organising it. I'm not actually on that subcommittee, and those plans are being developed, and that will come to fruition in the autumn. And actually, Antonia Ho, who might be here in the audience at the moment, I don't know if she is, but if she is, there she is, then she's actually representing Glasgow, but also is on that subcommittee. The third thing that we're investing our time into is running a pilot scheme. This is effectively seeing if the RSE can get its sort of hands dirty, if you like, and get involved in actually trying to partner people in a way that perhaps they hadn't thought of before or hadn't realized that there were opportunities before, by investing in getting those people together and small sums of money to try and build new partnerships, which might then go on to seek further funding. And we're at the moment in the middle of an activity, and some of you here in the room might actually be involved in that. We have our first meeting next week. Okay, next slide. So that's me on the left. And in the middle is Marcel Jasper, who's at the back there, and he will be speaking later on, I think, at the end of the day, bringing things together. He was the former chair of the RSE Africa Working Group. And here is Eva Maria, who is sitting here in the front. And so please do come and speak to us during the day. Give us any thoughts, very open to any ideas that you have about the things I've talked about, or indeed other things that the RSE might do to help you all. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, David. And straight over to Claire McPherson from University of Scotland.
Can you do the slides? Right, thanks. Morning, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here, which, listening to everyone, I'm going to bombard you with a few more fast facts about the sector, but this is my second month in post as Director of University Scotland, and having worked in the UK government, in the Scottish government, and actually for some time at the Scottish Funding Council, I've observed the sector and some of the wonderful things you do from lots of different positions. And today my role is, I guess, to take a step back and share with you some of the things that we think we take for granted about the strengths of the sector in Scotland. So we have a huge opportunity in University of Scotland to work with our members to promote and share the value of the sector and the work that we do, both to the UK government, Scottish government, and important stakeholders. And we've got so much to be proud of. A few facts and figures on the screen that we'll whiz in over the next slide. Scotland has 19 universities, the highest concentration of universities in Europe. Our universities are globally respected, placing Scotland 5th in the world, in the world for top 100 ranking institutions. And that global reputation is built on teaching excellence underpinned by world-class research, which I'm sure we'll hear more about over the course of today. In fact, every single one of Scotland's universities perform research that is of a world-leading quality. And in the last REF exercise, and I think Andy touched on this earlier, nearly 85% of research in Scotland was judged to be of world-leading quality, higher than any other part of the UK. So that's a metric that we see replicated in our research outputs. We are more productive as a country with a higher number of research papers produced per researchers. So we've got 8% of the UK population, 10% of its researchers, and 12% of the research output. Not only are we more productive, we also have more impact, with more research papers in the top 1% globally than any other part of the UK. I think that global reputation means Scotland is an international partner of choice for many other countries in terms of research collaboration. And there are over 110 countries collaborating with us in that endeavour. I think that means Scotland is globally competitive. If we move on to the next slide. I think one of my jobs in University of Scotland is to do more to showcase that, and an event like today, bringing people together and understanding how we individually as institutions deliver for Scotland, but also how we collaborate, is a key part of that. As well as being globally competitive, Scotland is globally impactful, with around a third of our research directly contributing to UN Sustainable Development Goals, delivering against some of the biggest challenges the world's facing, whether that's health and well-being, climate change, clean water, and tackling issues around global hunger. So we've got incredible quality research, strong international collaborations, and we're making a real difference in Scotland and around the world. I think the launch of the International Science Partnership Funding Programme allows Scotland and Scotland's researchers to do even more on the international stage to help address some of those challenges. But despite our successes, we're not without our own challenges here in Scotland, and I think as part of scene setting, it's worth just reflecting on that. If we move on to the next slide. Over the last decade, core investment for research from the Scottish Government has not been at the level that matches our ambition. Our share of UKRI funding isn't as strong as it used to be. So consequently, universities are becoming increasingly reliant on international student recruitment to subsidise the full economic costs of research. And apologies to Diana for touching on a bit of UK government policy, but I think the chilling effect at the moment of uncertainty around the UK government's migration policy means that there's a hugely challenging period for universities in terms of international recruitment, and that challenge will transfer directly into our researchers and our research base, because without that funding, there are huge challenges for us. So a great record and a great reputation and a hugely important asset for Scotland, but a really challenging context for us all at the moment as we operate in a period of significant uncertainty and restricted funding. The Scottish Government, however, recently launched an international education strategy, with international collaboration as a really key theme within that strategy, and I think that's really unique to the strategy, really recognising the importance of research and international collaboration to our universities. So lots of opportunities and challenges ahead. And I know as researchers, you're used to big challenges. We've got creativity, we've got adaptability, and we've got real agility within the sector. It's really in the DNA of what we do. And so I really look forward to listening to you all and learning over the course of today about how we rise to the challenge and do everything we can to promote Scotland and Scotland's role in the world. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Claire. And finally, Jonathan Underwood, the Major International Programmes Lead at Wellcome Trust.
Jamie. It's a real privilege to be here for many reasons. Two, I'll highlight. One, I'm an alumnus too of a Scottish university. I hope there's a long way to go yet, but I spent what I think will be the 4 best years of my life at Edinburgh University. So real privilege to be coming back. Also privileged, I know, because while I hope to contribute today, I'm sure I will learn by being here and listening. So very much looking forward to that too. So I'm lead for the Major International Programmes team at Wellcome, which is a health funder based in London, funding research predominantly in the UK and Ireland, but also extensively in low and middle income countries, under 4 research programmes, which are discovery research, infectious disease, mental health, and climate and health. As a cross-cutting team, the Major International Programmes team sits with colleagues focused on supporting the translation of research into health impact, and alongside teams who focus on data for science and health, and importantly, on creating supportive and enabling and inclusive research environments. We're driven at Wellcome by principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion under Wellcome's overarching mission, which is to support science to solve the health challenges facing everyone. And in the Major International Programmes team, we contribute to these goals through engaged partnership and funding to 7 institutions in Africa and South and Southeast Asia, to which we have provided core infrastructure funding for long periods of time, in many cases over many decades. So I'll spend a few minutes saying a little bit more about those 7 institutions and what we seek to achieve by funding them in the way that we do, and through that to contribute to today's discussions. But quickly before I do, just to give you a broad idea of the extent of Wellcome's funding. Between 2022 and 2032, we plan to spend £16 billion on our mission. And so that represents a huge increase in ambition. Going back to 2013-14, at that time, we invested 728 million. In 2022-23, we spent 1.7 billion on research. So just a little bit ahead of our 1.6 billion per year target. Across the 4 research programmes that I mentioned, there are £5 billion worth of active awards. 3.8 billion are in discovery research, Just under 1 billion is infectious disease. And then there are smaller amounts in our newer areas of focus, which are mental health and climate and health, around about 250 million to each of those at the moment. That 5 billion encompasses round about 2,000 active grants. Again, 1,700 in discovery research, with smaller numbers in the newer areas of recent focus. Where are we funding? Across the world, it's 1,000 organizations in 119 countries. 1.9 billion, so that's 28% of current funding, goes directly to organizations outside of the UK. And of the money that goes within the UK, 10% of that, so 700 million, is distributed internationally, but via partnerships with UK universities. And that's where our team comes in. So we're involved in major investments to 7 institutions, 5 of which are funded in collaboration with UK universities. I'll talk about those first and then come on to the last 2. So the 5 that we fund and have provided core funding to for decades are in South Africa, Malawi, Kenya, Thailand, and Vietnam. The South Africa program is ARI, the African Health Research Institute, and that's a collaboration with the University College of London. The Malawi program is based in Blantyre and is a partnership with the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, but I know benefits hugely from the collaborations with Scotland as well, as referred to earlier. The Kenya program, the Kemri Wellcome Trust program, is a collaboration with the Oxford University, and that is also the case with our 2 Southeast Asia programs, which are in Thailand and Vietnam, Moru, the Mahidol University, and Okru, which is based at the Hospital of Tropical Diseases in Ho Chi Minh City. So that's the set of 5 where we fund collaboratively. I guess I'll need 1 more minute if that's okay. And then in addition to that, and importantly, I think for the discussions today, we fund 2 institutions that are funders. So we fund the funder. One of those is the Science for Africa Foundation in Nairobi, which is funding across the continent consortia delivering on the health priorities identified by that funder. Consortia that have hub and spokes models, which means that while they are funded from Africa with money that we give for decisions to be made there, they also have collaborations back into the UK. So we're trying to reverse the model there. Likewise, with the India Alliance, just to complete the set, we have a program based out of Hyderabad, which is co-funded with the Indian government. And again, that is the first of what we hope will be the future examples of where actually we're getting more investment from governments into the programs that we're supporting, and thereby ensuring alignment with the health priorities. I had a few closing remarks, but maybe I'll hold them for discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much to all the panelists for setting the scene. We have a few minutes for questions. I just wanted to open to the audience to ask if anybody has a burning question, something they'd like to ask of any of the panelists here, or perhaps collectively of the group. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question. I think the FCDO white paper flags the challenges around the Sustainable Development Goals and says that really without improvements and investments, they're going to remain out of reach by 2030. I wonder, it's a question for many people across the sector, how relevant those goals remain as an anchor point for research commitments and research that's taking place, as well as for future investments. Maybe that's something that each of the panelists might be able to speak to. Pass to Diana first.
Thank you. Yes, I think the review this year, it was last year, wasn't it? Now showing that only 12% are on track was a wake-up call to everybody. So it's definitely informed a lot of the way that we're thinking. So the whole climate, the finance architecture piece, and recapitalising the multilateral development banks, and looking at other creative ways of funding is at the heart of it. So the and as two is the whole localization agenda, the fact that the power needs to be shifted. You've still got the control and the money, including at the World Bank, really being steered by the global north, for want of a better term. So I think that certainly with our like-minded governments, there is a commitment to shift and just reshape. I think that's what the white paper is all about. It's like reshaping, rethinking how you can. I mean, it's a huge global failure to be so far off track. In fact, getting worse, going backwards in a lot of areas. So I think they're there to stay. They're very much stay in focus. The Summit of the Future is coming up soon. We've got a big lens on September. And so there's been quite a few international moments this year where there's been these agendas been pushed by our ministers. So yeah, still very much in view.
Thanks very much. Maybe I'll pass over to Julie first, actually, to that.
Thanks. Yes, it's very much my view and the view of Scottish Government that the Sustainable Development Goals are still the goals that we need to achieve, and the Government has tracked its commitment against those goals. And I think I know many organisations, most organisations are doing that, and I think that's really important because it helps to focus the conversation and to keep the targets in mind. And where I feel, I think Scotland has a big role in north-south collaborations. I also think it's very important for south-south collaborations to take place. But where I feel some of our Scottish innovation is really important is producing some technologies, some knowledge, which is created in Scotland, but then applicable in many of the countries that we hope to help and to target the research. So yeah, keep the conversation very much at the top of the list.
Great, thank you. Maybe to the same question to Jonathan as a major funder.
So my engagement with the white paper is actually very recent. Just yesterday, I had the opportunity to listen in on a meeting of the chief scientists of all of the departments within the UK government that spend overseas development aid funding on research. So the first thing that I heard, and this was from Charlotte Watts at the FCDO, was that only 6% of ODA money is spent on research. So there's a challenge there, regardless of how much ODA is, in terms of making the case for research to be the right use of ODA money. And I think this room has a lot to tell UK government about why that matters. So there's perhaps an initial thought. The conversation was wide-ranging, a lot of it focused on the upcoming election, what that means for how to land the white paper, and increasingly the recognition that you need to identify where there are good examples of how, in supporting internationally, you're also supporting the UK. And there are lots of examples of that.
Great, thanks very much. And maybe Claire, I don't know if in terms of the kind of wider statistics you have for the sector, the SDGs kind of feature in that.
Yeah, and just to follow on from that comment, I think one of the issues for the sector is that if there are challenges in meeting those sustainable development goals, how do we collectively make the case for that investment? Because actually the solution lies in investing in research and doubling down in those partnerships and actually maximising them. And you know, if there's a revision of the goals or a refresh, ultimately the solution remains within a room like this in terms of finding a solution. And I'm sure that's the sector's that will be the kind of message we give to both UK and Scottish governments.
Great, thanks very much. And finally, David, in terms of the report that was published last year and the kind of contributions that the Royal Society makes.
In terms of the report that we published last year, that covers we were trying to find out all of the activities across the Scottish universities and non-university institutes to give people information really about what's going on so that they could sometimes find partners that they didn't know existed, etc., etc. As to it's relevant to the white paper, if you're asking me to comment on that, I don't have a comment.
Great. Okay, thanks very much. Well, in the interest of time, we're actually going to close for questions right now. I know there are a few others in the audience, but hopefully there'll be a chance to put your questions to the panel members during the break. We're going to move straight on to the next panel session for some institutional briefings. Thank you very much to all the panelists here for joining this morning. And I'm going to invite my University of Glasgow colleague, Surajit Ray, to convene this panel. So.
Hello, everybody.
So we'll have, this session will be really quick. We have three speakers, one from, I'll just invite the first speaker in the interest of time, David Schofield from British Geological Survey.
Morning, everybody. I think I have some slides. Unlike my fellows, I haven't prepared any notes, but I have an overabundance of slides, which hopefully will be available to you afterwards. I understand this doesn't work. But,
You could try.
okay.
I'll be here.
You're there, right? Okay, good. So yes, I'm David Schofield. I'm the British Geological Survey's International Director, based at our office in the Lyell Centre in Edinburgh. Can I have the next slide? And there are some geologists in the audience, I know, but for those of you who don't know us, we are a UKRI research institute. Our role is to deliver the UK's national public good in geosciences. We're funded partly through the NERC's national capability, but also through a very broad programme of external income that helps support delivery of that. The screen is over there. Working internationally is very much part of our DNA. We were established with the world's oldest geological survey, established in 1835. Our first international contract on behalf of the UK government was in 1841. And we've been working ever since. That gives us a very powerful brand when we are working around the world. And obviously we've worked through the whole ups and downs of UK's foreign policy over that time period. Working overseas definitely is part of our identity. The main reason is very much like our work in the UK, it's to deliver global public goods and research excellence that support the UK's foreign trade and development policies. One other thing about geology is it's a very kind of a global community, and one thing that we have as a geological survey is very much an ability to build relationships with other geological surveys around the world. So that's quite a strong door opening activity with other government agencies. And as such, we're very much in high demand from posts around the world from the UK. So, what we actually do, we work in partnerships around the world to help develop ODA. Typically, the mainstay of that is capacity strengthening in low to middle end countries. But we also carry out research. I'm looking over there, I do apologise. Carry out research into resources, minerals in water, geological hazards forecasting, disaster recovery, land quality, climate change resilience, urban resilience and planning. Quite a wide variety of things that we're active in around the world. The work is funded partly from the NERC International National Capability, part of which is badged against ODA, but also from other UK government sources, particularly at the moment, the Growth Gateway, the Centres of Expertise are quite important for us, the Integrated Security Fund, funded through global development banks, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank in particular, direct funding from foreign governments, a very, very mixed world that we live in and to deliver this work. Have the next one, please. Quick run through some of the things we do in resources. Next slide, please. Capacity building partnerships. We're particularly active in Southern Africa at the moment, particularly Angola, Malawi, Zambia, Tanzania. Yeah, I think that's where we're most active. Mostly what we're doing is working with the geological survey organisations in those countries to help strengthen their capacity in the mining sector. And that might range from ESG standards, it might be looking at technologies for small scale mining, it might be looking at intelligence around national to regional prospectivity. Can I move to the next one, please? Yeah, it's the next slide. Let's carry on with that. Next slide, please. I'm trying to go quickly. As well as that work in Southern Africa, we're also very active in Central Asia at the moment, where there's an emerging demand, the growing discussion around critical raw materials. We're also working particularly on sustainability of mining in South and East Asia. Just an example there of some work on tailing stability in the Philippines. What's quite interesting about this is a major environmental issue in the tailings dam picture you're looking at sits upstream of quite a large community. This is a nickel laterite deposit, which some of the contaminants remaining in that tailings are quite important to be able to monitor and control. So we're providing technical expertise in doing that. We're also working in sand in East Asia as well. Sand is actually quite important in that part of the world. Urbanisation is very rapid. Demand for sand is very high. There is a lot of conflict around sand. There's a lot of a requirement to actually provide better planning advice on managing sand. And we work with partners in East Asia to help them develop policies around sustainable management of sand resources. Can I have the next one, please? Geohazards, next slide, please. Geohazard and risk. So much of the work that we do is again based in South and East Asia and geohazard and risk. Mostly working around things to do with volcanoes and earthquakes, and providing capacity strengthening to similar organisations to ours around the world, carrying out monitoring, developing monitoring techniques, developing community approaches to monitoring and disaster risk recovery around earthquakes and volcanoes. Can I have the next slide, please? Resilience and urban hazards, again, mostly focused in South and East Asia, where there, again, rapid urbanisation in a tectonically active region. We work with many partners in that part of the world on developing strategies around monitoring and responding to earthquakes and urban subsidence to particular areas. Can I have the next one, please? Environment and climate change, next slide. Most of the work we're doing around that is perhaps in soil health in Southern Africa, but also global groundwater studies. Much of the groundwater work that we do is around resources and community engagement with water resources, and building capacity in partners, particularly in Africa. I would say most of the work we're doing in groundwater at the moment is funded through the World Bank, again, to provide an overview of water resources in Africa. I think that was probably it. There you go, very rapid whistle-stop tour. Hope you'll ask me some questions later.
Thank you very much, David. We'll move on to the next speaker, Antony Inglis from Edinburgh, Napier University.
Thank you very much. I'm Tony Inglis. I'm Head of Research Funding at Edinburgh Napier. I'm only 2 months into the role, so you forgive me if I can't answer some of the questions later on, but I'll try my best. I do have my colleague here, Nina Hackenpah, who's got her hand up. So she's been at Napier, I think, for 10 years now. So what I wanted to do really was just to briefly give you an overview, and really this is a snapshot of current activity. These are live projects that are happening, that have been partly funded by a variety of different research funders. And you can see here the current projects, the ones we've selected that are currently live, are representing really projects that are covering countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, South Africa, Kenya, Gambia, Ghana, and quite a few other countries. But broadly, the collaborative research in relation to international development that are either led by Edinburgh Napier University, or involve academics as co-investigators or partners, cover these kind of broad areas of education and employment, global health, environment and people, and then sustainable construction and clean energy. And if we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just to give you an example of that, we put up some projects here broadly relating to those themes. And you can see that, for example, we have a couple of projects that are based around areas like AI-enabled healthcare technology. And then a very recent award was made to an early career researcher to look at HIV and AIDS in Ghana. And this was certainly by Edinburgh Napier standards, because we're not a research intensive university, although we're very research active, was quite a large award. It was 1.5 million, involves lots of partners. But this is a project that's just about to get off the ground. And then if you look at some of the very innovative projects, so we had one project with Professor Johnson Zhang, which is around the use of dead bamboo in new structures, new construction, for buildings where there may be, for example, a need to put together or put buildings up, put structures up quite quickly, but that's using, materials which in the longer term, hopefully will be available and are cheaper for countries that are developing. And then broadly, in the area of kind of health, one of the priorities really for Edinburgh Napier universities is the kind of people-centered health, bringing together science, but also health practice in different countries. And you can see there that there is a couple of projects. One was looking at neonatal research in Vietnam, and that was quite a small project, but it's leading on now to some further research projects in that area. And then the final slide, please, if I can, is just to give you a sense of, in terms of the overall research and collaboration that Napier is involved in. Again, these are broad areas, and these reflect really the research centres that we have at Edinburgh Napier. And they are in areas, for example, in terms of cardiovascular health. Quite a significant proportion of the research that's actually happening is around global cardiovascular health, and that's looking at comparative data. It's working with partners in other countries. It's trying to bring together the science, but also the health practice in terms of, for example, people who have cardiovascular events, how do they recover? What are the different treatments? So those are the kind of themes in terms of looking at global health. And even when you're looking at kind of biomedicine, it's really focusing on that health journey with the people at the center of that, rather than just looking at theoretical science, although obviously that does play a part. Two of our big areas are in sort of AI and robotics, but also another big area, we have a Transport Research Institute, and it's looking at how we combine lots of the expertise around the university and with collaborative partners, to look at how you can look at that holistically in terms of research into materials, research into sustainable energy sources for transport, research into how transport enables smart cities, and in particular in terms of that kind of multi-modal transport systems and digital technology in terms of informatics and information for people using different forms of transport. And then one of our very big areas that there's a big focus on, for obvious reasons, in the next few years is in terms of cybersecurity. And again, we're looking at that from a global perspective, because I think the key thing for us as a university is that we want to enable collaboration as much as possible in those areas, because it's a global problem, and it will only be able to combat the threats to information and digital security through international collaboration. So that was a brief sort of snapshot. As a university, we collaborate widely because we have to. We're not a research-intensive university, so very often we'll be leading projects, but very often we'll be co-investigators on projects. So so Edinburgh Napier University is certainly open for collaborative research in these sort of areas. Thank you.
We'll move on to our last speaker, Mark Anderson from Glasgow, Caledonian University.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. Just to begin to contextualize where we've come from, in terms of what we do in research in Glasgow Caledonian University. The 2030 strategy that is being refreshed at the moment, but it was very much focused on the university's idea for the common good, looking at the SDGs and social innovation. So within that context, we were very interested in the whole area of international development. So what I'm going to talk about today are really a portfolio of projects that we've carried out in various parts of the world. And they're slightly different to I think what a lot of people are talking about, because these are not thematic research projects, but more about working with partners overseas to create an environment for research and innovation, especially focused on social innovation. Before we go to the next slide, I think it's important that although this is really about embedding an ecosystem of social innovation within the partner countries, it's also true that these projects formed the basis of a 4-star impact case study in the last REF, because they were underpinned by really good research carried out, both with researchers within the university and other institutions. So I think that although this isn't really a thematic research area, but it's much more about embedding ecosystems. So really the portfolio began with a project in Latin American Social Innovation Network. And this was predicated on the idea of creating social innovation support units that would be like knowledge exchange units within the universities, and that they would then have formalized relationships within the community, within various stakeholders. They had memorandums of understanding, they had incubation units, maker spaces, and all this was to help drive on the ground and the local agenda for research and innovation, very much predicated on the societal benefits. So we had partners in Colombia, in Chile, in Panama, and Brazil. And really, it was a project that was under Erasmus Plus capacity building. So it wasn't under Horizon, but it really helped to embed this infrastructure for future projects. And we had about 150 social innovation projects came out of it. Next slide. So this was a kind of cousin to the Latin American Social Innovation Network, the Southeast Asian Social Innovation Network. Again, the whole idea was to embed social innovation support units. And I think it's worth mentioning that the context was very different from country to country, obviously, not just between regions, but between countries. So, for example, in this, we had a Cambodia that was a partner that had a very, very high-tech approach to things, and they developed within their maker spaces virtual labs and 3D printers, etc. But we also had, for example, partners from Myanmar who really found it much more difficult to really embed the technological aspects of the project. And in fact, rather than lathes and sintering machines, they actually had sewing machines to encourage female entrepreneurship, for example. So it changes from country to country, but the main infrastructure that we developed was the same. As you probably know, that Brexit curtailed quite a lot of what we did, and suddenly the funding levels dropped, but we were really keen to continue. And at the same time, with COVID, travel was curtailed as well. But we continued, and this was a project that was sponsored by the British Council, and it was institutions across Asia, not just low and middle income countries, because there was Korea was a partner there, in Hong Kong, but we had Malaysia and Indonesia and the Philippines and Vietnam within that. And basically, it was very similar in concept, but it was only a 3-month project, completely delivered online, and really looking at the different activities that the universities could do to help develop a research and innovation infrastructure predicated on social innovation. As a spin-off, following COVID, we developed this national project in Vietnam, again with the same approach. So we had 5 different areas that we focused on. One was the research and innovation, incubation of new ideas, internationalization, and knowledge exchange. And really, it was very important that, and the teaching and learning as well within that. And so the whole concept was really to cover all these areas and to create units that would develop relationships through those areas. We also did work in South Africa, and this was much more geared, much more focused on employability of students, but a very similar approach, creating a unit that would be dedicated, but really creating a culture amongst the students and postgraduate students focusing on social innovation. Coil for Purpose was a project that just last year from Scottish Government funding. And this was really looking at how we could help support universities online, both research and learning and teaching, how we could embed areas of research and learning around healthy lives, sustainable environments, and just societies. So very much in keeping with the university's structures. And so this was focused with Southeast Asian partners, a variety of Southeast Asian partners. I just want to, because I'm Director of Research and Innovation, it sounds a little bit disingenuous of me to talk about projects I was directly involved in. I would just like to underline that the university has continued to do other development projects. And I think that these three are notable highlights. Sri Lanka, which was looking at renewable energies in Sri Lanka, flat pack wind turbines in Kenya, and also in Kenya and in Ghana, an African KTP to do with irrigation of tomatoes. And what I'd like to think is a lot of the kind of approach that we used with the social innovation projects helped kind of enrich these projects as well, and the way that we dealt with society. And then finally, I think I just felt that I wanted to kind of share with you some thoughts in terms of the lessons learned. And I think one of the things is that when we're collaborating with partners, there is a challenge of intercultural competence, especially with communities, with countries with different values of our own, that maybe religion, for example, plays a major part, and we have to learn to collaborate. And I think which brings me to the other thing, which is the whole question of how we can make our partnerships equitable. And I think it's a real challenge, and I was really pleased to see that the Wellcome Trust with its kind of nationally focused centres, because I think one of our big problems, our big challenges is going into a country with money and then kind of defining the agenda and how we can overcome that and make sure that the partnerships are benefiting at a local level and not just seen for the purpose of our own research excellence. I think there's another interesting challenge that we've come across is that universities' internationalization or international education is usually divorced from research. And I think that universities need to work a lot harder about integrating what they're doing in terms of their international, that it shouldn't just be focused on recruitment or even transnational education, but they should look at it more holistically and trying to develop that way. And I think this is especially important now with the cliff edge we are facing that's already been mentioned in terms of income and how we need a completely different model. And so in light of that, and this is just a very individual plug and probably not very ethical of me, but anyway, I'm going to plug it. We've just created a foundation which isn't, it's independent of the university, but it's a foundation where we're working with people from the global south and the global north, leaders in universities, just talking about how we can co-create a better, more equitable perspective, what we call reversing the gaze in terms of our international relationships with universities. So just a quick plug for that. Thank you very much.